Hello, my name is Katie Bayliss and you're watching the PRWeek video podcast produced in association with Marketeers for DC. Well, you can't have failed to have noticed that the Rugby World Cup started over the weekend, with all eyes on the England team looking to improve on their loss in the 2007 final to the Springboks with a tournament win this year in New Zealand. Today I'm joined by Simon Lewis, Head of Communications at Premiership Rugby, and Jonathan Castleman, International Managing Director at Fast Track, to discuss the PR opportunities thrown up by this huge event, what an association with the sport means for brands, and the logistics of running PR operations on opposite sides of the world. Well, firstly, Jonathan, what are the opportunities for PRs, for their brands and their clients to get noticed during the World Cup?
Well, Simon and I were talking before. I think it very much depends whether you are an official sponsor of the World Cup, whether you're a national team sponsor, or whether you are a committed partner like Aviva in the UK to the Premiership. And from our point of view, we've managed 3 of the World Cup sponsors, and for them it is very clear that it's an international platform. It's not a domestic platform. We're looking to create campaigns that can work across territory. So for some markets they'll need to be up-tuned and down-weighted. But the opportunity is to associate at that level with the 3rd largest sporting event in the world that has an audience of between 3.5 to 4 billion spectators on TV and gives them a window of 7 weeks to really drive deeper connections with their clients.
And Simon, I guess in terms of the association with the World Cup, I guess as being such a massive event on the world sporting stage, what does it mean for brands in terms of their reputation having that association with such a massive tournament?
Well, I think it gives them an added credibility. I think a lot of the brands that Jonathan's talking about have got credibility in rugby. They've been involved for a long time. And it is such a large tournament. It also has slightly different brand values, I think, to other tournaments. You know, the sport of rugby is slightly different to other sports, and I think it gives brands an association with different sorts of values that they might not get from other sporting tournaments.
What type of values are you talking about there in terms of rugby being different, I guess, from other sports?
I think you just have to look at the partners worldwide of rugby. They're established brands that are looking for the values of integrity, teamwork, respect, heritage, history. If you look at what happened with James Haskell this weekend, you know, at the end of the game, no one's condoning what he did, but actually straight afterwards he apologised and didn't try and make any excuses for being in the heat of the battle. And I think that's one of the things that brands like to associate with in terms of rugby union.
I think they're also coming into a sport, rugby union, which is growing very fast, and we know that Sevens is going to be in the Olympic Games in 2016. So I think they're also looking at an opportunity to go into different markets and get involved in a sport that still has a lot of growing to do. It's only been professional for 10 or so years in the UK.
In terms of, I guess, one of the big brands associated with rugby in England, O2, one of the team sponsors, there's, I guess, reports that they are looking to withdraw sponsorship from football, but they'll stay with rugby. What do you think that actually says about rugby? Does it actually say anything about the different type of sponsorship for the different sports?
Well, I think as we said before, there is a different type of consumer who watches rugby and who reads about rugby, who plays rugby. I think there are opportunities again for growth. It's a sport that's still growing very fast. And I assume that a brand like O2 would probably think, well, this is a sport that, in a sense, we can own within the telecommunications sector. They've got a long history of involvement with England, previously with Premiership Rugby as well, and with Ireland. So it's a sport, again, they have credibility in.
I think also rugby is so far the number 2 sport in the world to football. And from a pure cost point of view, you know, rugby union is comparatively reasonably priced compared to football. You know, you get Manchester United team shirts going for 20 million plus a season. I don't believe the RFU have managed to get that much from O2, and you know, it's a substantially less initial investment, which gives you more latitude to actually invest in the activation of the sponsorship, which is what brings it to life.
In terms of past Rugby World Cups, obviously it's getting even more commercial as they go on. If we think about 1987 when it started, probably very amateur days. Now in 2011, very, very different. What can we learn, I guess, from the way that World Cups are evolving in terms of PR?
I mean, I'll leave Simon to talk about PR. I think from a commercial point of view, you've changed from 87, where one of the sponsors was Heinz, and rugby union was traditionally I think 99% of the audience for rugby union was male, and 98% of the products bought by Heinz were bought by women. So it's moved from a arguably chairman's whim and sort of looking at people who liked rugby union, to it's a serious commercial investment now. And you know, the biggest change we're seeing in this tournament is through social media because of the time changes, and I know we're going to talk about that in a minute, but it has moved dramatically in terms of the breadth of sponsors, and even in not a large commercial market like New Zealand, they've managed to attract some real blue chip clients down there, which has been a fantastic effort from Rugby World Cup Limited.
Yeah, I think from a PR point of view, because the tournament is so much bigger now, it attracts so much more focus from all different sections of the media. And I think from a reputational point of view, it's important that you understand the pressures that brings. It's a fantastic opportunity, but you know, the spotlight really is on you, and I think that as we know will always serve to kind of intensify any mistakes you make, but it can also give you huge opportunities as well.
And I guess we've talked obviously about the fact that this is in New Zealand, it's the other side of the world. From a logistical point of view for, I guess, PRs working down there and having to coordinate with teams back here, how difficult is that, and does it make a difference to the approach or the way that you work things there?
Well, we actually look after three of the partners. We look after Emirates, Land Rover and KPMG as a domestic partner. And we have a team of 12 people who are working on those clients in New Zealand and have been there. The majority of them have been there for over 6 to 9 months, some 18 months in the build-up to manage the rights management process. But from a PR point of view, obviously the time difference is a huge issue. You know, the stories are happening almost 24 hours before the broadsheets will report them properly in papers. So that means that, again, this sort of the influx of watching things online and having to manage two teams, one to manage the domestic media in whichever country it is, but secondly to manage the issues that arise on the ground in New Zealand and deal with them in real time is very important. Equally, it's meant that brands have had to work harder to activate in different markets, and Land Rover's done a promotion in South Africa where they've teamed up with SuperSport, and 500,000 people have entered a promotion to win the chance to go to Rugby World Cup. So actually the domestic activations become even more important in terms of the partnerships to drive value out of the sponsorships.
And Simon, what impact will social media have on this Rugby World Cup?
Well, I think it'll have a massive impact. I mean, it's the first Rugby World Cup where we've really seen what I think most of us think of as social media. I think there's two main things. I mean, I think one, there are opportunities for brands to use social media to reinforce their association with rugby, and we've got Aviva Premiership Rugby still carrying on right the way through Rugby World Cup, so it's an area that we're working quite hard at. Secondly, I think it's going to be really interesting for supporters to use it as sort of a news media, really. I mean, Jonathan was talking before about there being 24 hours before newspapers in this country, the traditional media, are going to be reporting on Rugby World Cup, and I think supporters more and more will be using social media to debate the points from the weekend's matches. I think there were 35 million Twitter followers this weekend alone, so it shows just how huge social media is.
Yeah, and certainly, thanks, Simon. Certainly from a brand point of view, it's something that over the last 12 months across all events, this multi-screening. People don't, if they're live, they're not just watching, they're also tweeting, they're texting, they are posting pictures on Facebook. If they're at home, they're debating with their friends. So there's, as a brand, traditionally, the battleground was before, in the middle and after to try and connect and to drive PR and comms messages. Now it's during. You know, you absolutely need to be adding value to the discussion, to be fueling the debate, to be adding value to the fans and your potential and existing customers' relationship with Rugby World Cup and any other events during as well as before, in the middle and after. So a huge impact, both in terms of crisis management, which Simon alluded to, and when things go wrong, it's literally it is literally all over the news bars, as we've seen all year, and sport's no different, but also it can be used as a really positive tool to help drive those deeper connections with the clients, for the clients with their customers.
Well, I guess the time difference aside, running PR in such a massive tournament must be quite a difficult thing to do. Does it make a big difference when you are having to deal with, I guess, lots and lots of different teams, lots and lots of different PRs, all trying to do what they need to do at the same time? Well,
it's certainly going to be a scramble, isn't it? That's for sure. You know, looking at it from the RFU side and the England team, they will have a team. They've got a team of 3 on the ground in New Zealand, a team of 3 in Twickenham. And as Jonathan said, it's very important for them to coordinate. They've got UK-based media in New Zealand reporting back. They've obviously got media on the ground in the UK reporting in real time. So it's very important for them to coordinate and plan, which I know they have done. But there's a lot of people fighting for what is a large amount of space, but there's a lot of competition for it.
Yeah, and from a brand point of view, it's all about the planning. You know, there'll be reactive PR, but if you're a sponsor of the World Cup, you've spent probably 18 to 24 months thinking about how you're going to activate this tournament. And from a PR point of view, you'll have your ambassadorial stories in place. You'll have your Land Rover, for example, or a World Cup sponsor, but also an England sponsor, and they have an off-roading day with the England team, so they'll generate a lot of coverage out of that. KPMG are running Inside the Business of Sport, which has been planned for a long time, and is working with some of the All Black coaching staff and the organising committee. So I think this is execution time, dealing with issues from a PR point of view, which again have to be dealt with in real time on the ground. But from the brand rather than the governing body's point of view, it should be about delivery and making sure you maximise your clients' return on investment at this time.
So for the England team in particular, for their PR team, any advice for them a week into the tournament?
I certainly
Fix
wouldn't
their
be one.
shirts, I think.
Apart from that, I wouldn't be one to give them advice. No, I mean, I think they, as Jonathan said, I know they've done a heck of a lot of planning, and they've got good teams both here and in New Zealand. So and they've got very good legal support, both for disciplinary issues and for crisis, which is something that obviously I'd be thinking about with the spotlight so much on you. But no, I wouldn't give them any advice. Actually, the interesting thing is that so much of what they do, and in fact I think brands around individual teams, it sounds obvious, but is very much coloured by how successful those teams are. And particularly if you don't get to a quarter-final, we've seen it before in this country that the media obviously tends to fall away once England go or once Scotland go with their media. So you're very much tied to the fortunes of your team, I think.
Excellent. Well, Simon and Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
And thank you for watching this week's PRWeek podcast.